All right, I think we're gonna get started. 1:16 on the dot here. But thanks for coming. This is the 6 overlooked causes of autoimmune. I'm your neighbor down the hill in the Springs. So thanks for having me up here at, what are you guys, 8,500 feet of elevation? Nice. And we'll talk about that as potential one of the causes that we're gonna struggle with. And so we got some agreements. So I have gifts for you. So the first 5 people that came early, you guys got books. And that's a book I wrote 3 years ago with the intent of, actually no intent of writing a book. It started out as just an article I was writing on kind of giving people in ministry and service-based fields the permission to stop and take care of yourself so you could later better serve yourself. But the more I got into it and the more I dove into the content and the more I kept writing, it just kept kind of puking out of me where I was like, this is way too long for an article. So it turned into a book. And kind of with the premise that both my dad and brother were like the ultimate servers of other people, but at a detriment to their own selves. So in June will be a year anniversary of my father's death. So 3 hours before Father's Day. And my brother, this will be the 10-year anniversary of his death in August. So they're kind of the ones that had that intent. So now me at 40 is the elder statesman of the male people in my family. 2, I assume you're smart. Colorado in spring gives you lots of reasons not to be here. And so you're taking this to another level, taking care of your health. And so I'm going to talk concepts, assuming you're smart enough to handle them. If not, that's kind of number 4 or number 5, be an advocate for your experience. If you're like, wait, stop, like help me out with this one and we'll slow down and do this type of thing. It's not about what happens up here. I'm not a professional speaker, never claim to be, never want to be. So don't count my ums and my so's and all that fun stuff. If there's one thing you take away tonight or this afternoon is that the body never does stupid stuff. So I want to talk about autoimmunity as an intelligent adaptation for you to escape what's potentially going to harm you. So looking at it as an overprotection opposed to the body attacking itself. And when you change the way you look at that in that realm, you're going to ask a lot better questions and then hopefully get a lot better answers and create a better action plan. And the last is, today's about information. What does information get you to do? Think. Get you to think. That's all I'm hoping to get you to do is just to think. I may say some stuff you're like, well, that's totally against what I think about, but it got you to think. Or it maybe confirm a lot of what you're doing. The next step after information is what? It's cheat sheet up on the board. Is knowledge. So what's between information and knowledge? What's that?
Learning.
Application. So you take what you learned, you apply it, and now you have some knowledge. Thank you. Now, knowledge does not mean you're the expert always. Like I tried to redo our powder room and our main floor at one point. It was just installing a vanity. I had the information, so I Googled it, saw what you had to do, looked at the tools. It took me about 12 hours to install this thing where someone that's an expert probably could have been a 45-minute job for them. So that's the next step is knowledge, then with experience equals wisdom. And this is where people like me and your other healthcare providers help provide the shield. Like we're in the Front Range and something cool on the Front Range is we have bison and they're the only animal that turns towards the storm. Most animals try to run away from it and what ends up happening? They're in the storm a whole lot longer, right? The bison turns towards the mountains, embraces the suck, and is like, I'm not gonna avoid anything, I'm just gonna get through a little bit quicker. And so that's where wisdom comes into play in the experience, is that, yes, this will be a sucky time, but kind of ride my curtails a little bit. I'll shield you from some of it, but you're gonna have to go through the hard times yourself. We'll see on the other end of it. So today, again, just about information. Now, who am I? So husband, we'll celebrate 11 years in May. Father, so 3 boys, oldest is 7, 5, and 3. And we did the soccer games this morning, so I'm coming right from that. So it's not just like I carved this out and the only thing on my day. Author, so you guys got the book that showed up. Experimenter, So this is probably one of the funnest things I get to do in my career is people like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm like, who cares what I think? Let's experience it. So I do experiments on your behalf so you can kind of see, okay, what's the potential outcome with this? Like last August, I did a month of meat only, like no fruit, no vegetable, did lab work, did measurements. It was awesome, honestly. Like it was probably good. And so now I would say I'm a meat-based diet opposed to a plant-based diet. What else? CBD, fasting. Like, so I kind of am like the experimenter for you. So I have some knowledge behind it opposed to studies, because what happens with studies? That never really applies to the real world, does it? So let's put it in real world thing. But what ultimately got here is I was the sick kid. So I was the chronic ear infection, the chronic strep throat, the chronic bronchitis, antibiotics. I don't think I ever had steroids, but maybe in there somewhere. Until the point I got into college where it developed into eczema, where I would just open my hands up and just bloody mess, and just this ridiculous dichotomy of like it itches so bad but also hurts so bad at the same time. And I remember playing basketball and like, hey, I'm just going to take 2 or 3 ibuprofen as prophylaxis, or am I going to do a 5-mile run? I'm going to take 2 or 3 ibuprofen just to make sure I'm not sore afterwards and all that. So this is before I knew what I knew now. So with that said, I've kind of been in your shoes with the autoimmune stuff. I've seen the detriments that I did to myself come out the other end and gain experience from that. Now, this sick kid thing, that led me to where I'm at because it wasn't just me. I grew up in a small town, like 15,000 people in upstate New York. My dad was a pastor, and a good Sunday was maybe 40 people. It was an older population congregation, and we had quite a few potlucks. I remember seeing little Dixie cups in front of people's place settings with these colorful looking things in them. And kind of getting frustrated, like, why do these people get candy and I don't? Until someone, my mom, who's a nurse, was like, those aren't candies, those are medicines. So I heard prayer requests for all these health conditions. I saw Dixie cups full of medication. And as time went on, I saw more colorful things in these. I saw them getting fuller and fuller, more prayer requests. So my deduction was they weren't getting the right medication. So I'm going to go to college as a pharmacist. I'm going to be the ones that give them the right medication. I had no idea about lifestyle and all these other things. You guys have been to church potlucks. What's usually served there? Starch, and more sugar, right? So never equated those things together. So I got to college, was freshman class president, so I was pretty social, involved in intramurals, and I don't think my advisor knew how to handle a kid like that. She was used to like the super introverted, which I am, like that's how I power up. Super introverted kid, not very social, and she kind of looked at me with a B average, like, I've seen kids like you, you're not going to get to pharmacy school. I'm like, it's a semester into college. She's like, don't worry about it. Like, I'm seeing kids like you, don't even keep going. So she wouldn't sign off on the next semester's course load. So the competitive side came out and was like, let me go home. I'm going to look at the course manual and see what is hard. Got to the word biochemistry, knew nothing about it. But it was still in the science department, not under her supervision, under a different advisor. I'm like, I'm going to do that, make her eat her words in 3.5 years. More out of spite, I chose biochemistry than any love of science or application, what I could do as a career. Not a good decision, right? Like, don't do things out of spite. She retired the next semester, so I've never seen her since, never had the satisfaction of like shoving the diploma in her face. But instead, I got all the one-on-one attention you could ever want in an undergraduate program. I was the only biochemistry major in my graduating year. So I was the kind of guinea pig and workhorse for this advisor who had grants from the NIH to sequence genetics or sequence bacteria genetics. And he had grants from the NIH, so your tax dollars, all that fun stuff. What ended up happening was, do you guys remember the Petri dish? These things? Great. So what do you fill this dish with? Like just the dish itself, what should go in it? What's in the gel? So you got nutrients, And then you got to put it in an incubator, so you got oxygen levels, you got temperature levels. What if the dish is dirty? Can't use it. And so it was this internal, was it the environment that caused these cells to live and grow and replicate, or was it the DNA of the bacteria? And so what happened every time I messed up one of these dishes? What happened to those cells, do you think? They didn't thrive, right? So the environment always won, regardless of the bacteria's DNA, because we were using clones. It was the same one every single time. So I got to a point, heading out of undergrad, I'm like, well, I don't want to do this the rest of my life because it's the environment that can help more people than trying to stop the replication of this DNA. So I had to look at professions. Okay, what could I do? And so that's what actually led me to chiropractic. This gave me the broadest scope of what I could do to work with someone's individual petri dish, how they eat, how they move, how they think, social, all that type of stuff. I had no intention of being the spine specialist going into chiropractic college. And so I got there, and I was like one of two kids, like, who's never been adjusted? I was one of those kids. I'd never been adjusted going into chiropractic college. I saw it as a tool to then work with someone's lifestyle. Now, it gave me a lot more tools to work with, so I'm eternally grateful for it. But the first gig I took out of chiropractic college was in California. And after I got comfortable with the boss, I'm like, hey, let me do some workshops in nutrition. He's like, great. What you can do, you have to keep it to 15 minutes, and you have to serve pizza and soda. And I'm like, exactly. I think that was his nice way of saying no. Like, because it was a heavy insurance model, and he would only do what insurance would cover. He had no like even inkling of helping people outside of what you could put a code for and bill for. And so that was kind of a turning point where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of done. Let me find what else is out there. And that's when I moved to Colorado to chase a girl who's now my wife, kids. So that worked out. That was all fun. But what it came down to was it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And so if I was going to help people give them medications to alter their DNA expression and not change their world, that didn't make sense in my head. And so what led me was to functional medicine. So this is kind of the career path. And for those that don't know the term, it's not really industry specific or profession specific. You'll have MDs, you'll have nurse practitioners, you'll have dentists, you'll have chiropractors. Like, it's that we look at the body through a series of systems opposed to a collection of symptoms. And I would say probably the biggest thing that it's taught me to do is just ask way better questions. And that's what I'm hoping to impart to you guys today, is to ask better questions. And so first question, how many of you either have or know somebody with an autoimmune disease? Every hand. How many can you name? Just yell them out. Hashimoto's. Lupus. Scleroderma. Arthritis. MS. Diabetes. So this is just page 1. Here's another list of autoimmune disorders. And so the question is, do we really have that many different autoimmune disorders? Or what if we looked at autoimmune, like if we didn't have so many autoimmune, but every disease process got to an autoimmune phase? So the body's like, I've had enough. I'm going to become the helicopter parent and make sure you don't keep going down this path and replicating into a bigger mess. And so it doesn't happen with an event. Autoimmunity is a spectrum of a series of little events that finally add up to a big expression. And you have to go back to this thing. Start with the cell, because that's all you are. You're one of these in a petri dish, just on a global scale of 100 trillion, and your petri dish is your environment. It's what you're exposed to. It's the lights, it's the sounds, it's the food you choose, it's the relationships you have. Endless possibilities. And so there's a lot of variables for your DNA. For them to blame it on DNA, I think is like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, our DNA wasn't meant to handle 80,000 chemicals in today's age. It wasn't meant to handle X, Y, like all these things. DNA is a constant equation. So when you're looking at autoimmune, first look at the cell. There's got to be cell damage. We have 100 trillion of them. Are you going to feel that one cell damage? No. It's going to start progressing. You're going to get to some tissue damage. And then inflammation. Do we feel inflammation? Down the road. Much inflammation starts to build without any symptoms. So, say if you have a symptom, you can pretty much assume you have inflammation. But just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean you don't have inflammation. Like, what's the first sign of 50% of heart attacks? Death. Death is the first symptom of half of heart attacks. Nobody felt anything. So we have inflammation. Now we start to get bigger scale. So that one dysfunctional cell is getting on a bigger global scale because we're not feeling it, we're not quantifying it, and we got some organ damage. And then symptoms start to happen. So this could be a 20, 30, 40-year journey till finally someone comes into my office in their early 40s, and now they've been diagnosed with those autoimmune things that you just said. Now we're seeing this quicker and quicker because now we're seeing it a ton of kids. So think long-term spectrum, and this is why my intake paperwork is, if you printed it out, would be 23 pages long, because we're trying to get all the experiences and exposures and choices and all those things to paint this global scale picture to figure out, okay, where's the shift happened, where's the damage occurred, let's nip it in the bud. So next question, what if we stop looking at autoimmunity as the body attacking itself, instead looking at the body as overprotecting itself? And so why would this happen? Why would it be intelligent for the body to overprotect itself?
It's made to, right? We're just made to heal, and it's made to protect.
Yeah.
We're doing stuff to ourselves.
It's purpose, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's a purpose. Yep, we're doing it to ourselves. And a lot of times we don't know we're doing it to ourselves. So kind of let me paint a picture. It starts with the brain. And if you had to, if like your kid's like, hey, what's the brain do? And you're like, I have to give a one-word answer, what would you say? Think, everything. Any other ideas?
Control.
What's that?
Like control.
Control.
Direct.
I like the word direct, but I think I like the word organize better. So we're organizing life. So if you go out into the parking lot and there's a mountain lion, what's your brain going to do?
Fight or flight. Freeze.
Yep. So your brain's going to shift this way into protection mode. Now what if you go in the parking lot and someone's like, just because you're cool, here's a suitcase with $1 million. No strings attached. The tax has already been accounted for. Is that going to make you freaked out?
Yeah.
Because we're too skeptical, right? We're too cynical. So we'll go this way. But, yeah, exactly. You may have a moment of like, this is great. Now who's around me that's going to steal this from me? So you're going to, what health is just the ability to flip-flop. Growth. Sorry, my chicken scratch. I'm usually writing this upside down in a console, and my handwriting is a lot neater upside down than it is right side up. So we can't be in protection and growth at the same time. What health is just the ability to adapt one side or the other. So when people say health is balance, impossible. Like, you're never going to be down this way unless you're dead. If you can't adapt, you're dead. If you can't grow, you're dead. And so you want to be able to go one side versus the other. The problem is, where do you think most people end up? Yeah, they end up over here because we have, and I'll go over through 6 of them, but in big categories, we can call that stress. But don't think stress is just this emotional fear, worry, anger. It can be chemical stress. It can be nutritional. It can be physical. It can be relational. There's a bunch of different subcategories of stress. And what we'll talk about later, all stress is being deficient. So if I don't give this cell what it needs, that's a stressor. Or if I give it what's potentially harmful, that's a stressor. So deficiency and toxicity are really the root of stress and the root of all disease. Now, we shift this way What's the first thing your brain talks to? So we got the wild animals in the parking lot. How are we going to escape it? We're going to run. How does your muscles get the signals to say run away?
Chemicals.
From where specifically? Adrenals, yes. See, you guys are smart. So your adrenals. What does adrenals sound like? Adrenaline, yes. I'm going to put that in a bigger group called the catecholamines. Don't worry about that. Just think adrenaline. And what's going to happen to your heart rate? Is that smart or stupid? How many times out of 100?
100 times.
Always. Body never does stupid stuff. What happens to blood pressure? What about your cholesterol? Smart or stupid? What about your oxygen levels? If you're sprinting all the time, what's going to happen to your oxygen levels? What about your chance of blood clots? What if the bear gets you? Do you want to bleed out? No. So blood clots will go up. Now, you go to the parking lot, mountain lion there, next door is Emergicare, and you walk into them. And all this is going on. What are they going to label you with? Right, they're going to be like, you have heart disease. You have the number one cause of death in our country. And then you're going to walk out of Emergicare with what? They're going to give you a blood pressure medication. They're going to give you a blood thinner. And they're going to give you a statin. Now what's your chance of surviving those bear attacks? Went down. But you feel good as they rip your arm off, right? Because you're not going to feel anything. So medicine is phenomenal emergency stuff, but the problem with autoimmunity, it's not an emergency situation. It's taken decades usually to develop, and they're trying to apply those same interventions that would save your life if a lion ate your face off with the same circumstance as a chronic illness. And this is why our healthcare rates, we spend 86% of dollars in chronic illness. They're trying to apply what they worked getting a fire department to the scene of an accident versus what a contractor would use to build up the house afterwards. Now, keep in mind a few things. The medication for blood pressure, medication for cholesterol, we're going to touch on that later. Now, these same signals go up to the part of the brain that's alert, or think anxiety. So I would argue the same process that caused you a heart attack is also the same process that caused you anxiety. If you're anxious, what happens to memory, concentration, and learning? Right. So that's going to be on this side. So now memory, concentration, and learning is down. What do we start labeling that with? If it's in kids, ADHD. And what do we give them? Which is what? A stimulant. So we actually purposely chemically put them back on this side of life to stimulate this because it's getting worn out, it's getting beat down. And so this will help you focus, because if you're running from a bear, you're going to be like, boom, boom, you're going to make quick decisions. Adrenals also release another hormone. You guys have heard of cortisol. When I usually ask, people say, what is this associated with? What do they say? Stress. I say survival. Change your language. If you can't get cortisol out, what's your chance of surviving that bear attack? Right. So tell someone with adrenal fatigue that they're not stressed out because they can't produce this. It's not going to happen. Better question, what's the role of cortisol? What does it do in the body? It dumps sugar in your blood. Why is that intelligent? Instant energy, so you can run away. Now, we have checks and balances, so if blood sugars go and skyrocket, what's one of our balance points to make sure that doesn't go into a coma? If I gave you a Frappuccino, Snickers bar, Diet Coke because you're watching your sugar intake, I've seen it on intake forms. What will prevent you from basically passing out? Insulin, yes. And so insulin wants to store sugar, but your brain's like, well, there's lions. I either need it now to escape now, or do I want it for another escape later? Which one's going to win? Yes, you're always going to err on the side of caution. This wins. So now we're insulin resistant with high blood sugar, and we can label that what disease? Diabetes. Insulin resistance, though, you can expand out to virtually any chronic illness. Alzheimer's, calling that type 3 diabetes. Major influence with that. Now, here's where we start getting more into the immune aspect of it. There's another hormone called DHEA that gets released. Anyone know what that usually goes to building up? That's DHA. DHEA, sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. But those would be on the growth side, right? So when someone's in stress mode, what happens to their fertility and sex drive? Right, goes down. We don't want to waste any energy on that. We're not worried about making babies if we have to run from a bear. What's going to happen to sleep? Right, we're going to go on that side too. So your body will take these guys and it's going to start sending signals to the gut. So think the gut, mouth, out the other end. There's one big inner tube. And if you have to run and escape and dive through a nasty swamp and there's dirty diapers and there's toxic waste and all this fun stuff, are you going to second guess it before you jump in? You can feel the breath of this lion, like right there. And you know cats don't like water, right? Like, I don't know. So your gut says, I'm going to clamp down because these stress signals say clamp down for me. And so if you get to inhale or ingest something harmful, we're going to keep that safe. Now you get to safety, what happens after that? You're going to throw up, diarrhea, whatever those things. So what I see a lot of times, I take care of a lot of high achieving professionals. They're pushing hard because they know they have a vacation coming up. What happens on vacation? They get sick. Every time. How's vacation? It sucked. I got sick. Or, for those of college kids, here's 2 weeks worth of finals. They're staying up late, studying, eating crap, not sleeping. They get home for Christmas break. What happens? They're sick. Did they get sick on Christmas break or vacation? No, they just finally let it express. And so this gut will keep things under wraps. Either there's a breaking point, it just can't handle the onslaught as much, or you finally let the gas, put off the gas pedal. And so many people with an autoimmune expression, I have to warn them, look, when we start shifting you to this side, you're probably going to get worse first. That's because your body's been squashing and suppressing so much for so long. Now we're able to bring it to the surface. And so one of the things I always hear, like, they may have antibodies off the charts, like, I never get sick. That's because they're always in this mode. So when we start shifting, I'm like, guess what? You're probably going to get sick. Like, keep that in the back of your mind. So gut tube, clamp down. The problem on this side, if you're sprinting all day, is that nice and relaxing, or do you get tired? Right. So this gut barrier gets tired, and what happens? It starts releasing. And so now what should be in that tube leaks into the bloodstream. You guys have heard of leaky gut? Cool. I'll explain a little bit more of it later. And then we have these antibody expressions. So antibodies now go look around, and they're like, hey, I've seen enough of this come in the system. I'm going to go look for something that else is pretty similar. And that could be your thyroid, it could be your joints, it could be your brain, it could be your pancreas, it could be whatever. And that's where we become individuals in the expression of autoimmunity. So all of us could drink the same gallon of arsenic and all of us could have a different response to it. So chasing that symptom, that endgame expression, and trying to label all those diseases does nothing, because there's a systematic dysfunction that created to that point. And so what ends up happening, these guys come up, they talk to the liver comes down and starts to produce inflammation. So now, regardless of all these external things, we have an internal firestorm going on. Detox is basically shoved off to the side. And then we just have this perpetual pattern of dysfunction in here. Makes sense? Cool. And so with that said, here's 6 things that I commonly see on my intake paperwork that I see often leading to this imbalance, autoimmunity, you name it. So the first one, adverse childhood events. And we'll go through these questions. Number 2, leaky gut. So we just kind of talked about it. The 3, the business of busy. So for you that got a book, I harp on the how do you call it? The currency or the status of busy. I'll talk more about SATE and how that's especially going to be related to something like Hashimoto's, chronic infections, and then the 6th one is the U.S. healthcare system. So adverse childhood events. You can go Google ACE. It's a questionnaire, adverse childhood events. There's 10 questions. And I'll go through them right now. But for every 2 that you got, so they basically surveyed these people that got hospitalized due to autoimmunity. It was a 100% chance that they had more than 2 answers of yes on these questionnaires. Now, as I go through these questionnaires, I want you to kind of put an asterisk next to it. Some of these could be like, yes, I had that, but most of us grew up in a house like our parents just tried hard. Like, we're not perfect. It didn't, like it's hard parenting. These questions are more like malintent, like intentionally trying to abuse and hurt somebody. And I was at a conference this past weekend in Nashville, and she had all 10 of them. She's in her 40s now, had like overcome cancer, but she had cancer like 3 times by the time she was 16, and this was one of the biggest factors for it. So first question, did a parent or adult often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Number 2, did a parent or other adult in your household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Now, one thing, and I kind of lost my train of thought on that one. Did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, have you touch their body in a sexual way, or try to actually have oral, anal, vaginal sex with you? Did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? So these are like really intentionally bad things that purposely happening. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you and take you to the doctor if you needed it? So you can see these questions are pushing someone here. It doesn't matter how young you are. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Like, I had a woman last time I did this, she's like, does it just have to be in childhood? I'm like, no. Like, if this happened in adulthood too, it's still going to set the stage for all this. You just had less time of accumulation. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, had something thrown at her, kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at 2 minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? Like, I see these questions, I'm like, no way that's happened, but on my intake, people are like, yeah, that was our household. Do you ever live with anyone who has a problem with drinking or alcohol or use street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Did a household member go to a prison? So any yes, you can put a tally on. So a 10 out of 10 score would mean like that person had all those things. And so regardless if they ate perfectly, regardless if they had the perfect exercise routine, had a non-toxic home, this can start that persistent pattern. And I've had consults with this where like someone will call me up and like, oh yeah, my diet's perfect. I'm like, great, what about relationships? But I can't eat any better. Great, can you do 10 push-ups? But I don't know what else I would change. But like they just kept shifting the conversation back to diet. And so I'm like, I don't think I'm the guy to help you. Like, clearly not in the right place. Now, and that often leads to busyness, especially, I don't know, the mom kind of syndrome of doing what's always best for the kid, and usually coming at the expense of them. And this is something I harp on my wife a lot. Like, just get out of the house. It's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm like, I don't care. Like, just go sit somewhere. Like, so it's just this funny dynamic. But I think it always comes down to the comparison. And what comparison is gonna do is you're going to envy the best thing in that person's life, and you're usually gonna compare it to the worst thing in your life. And will you ever win that argument? No. So guess what? You shift over here. If you're going to envy the best in someone else's life, you're always going to have to envy the worst in someone's life. Like this past weekend, again, at this conference, there's some pretty successful people on stage. But as they get going, they made mention like, oh, my ex-wife or my ex-spouse. And I'm like, oh, like what happened there? Like, or something with their kids. So there's more to the story than just what they're going to see on stage type of thing. So just to combat the busyness, usually it comes down to the comparison where my kid's not in 18 different activities. Like there's, from a parent, you need to stop. Leaky gut. So we talked about this whole dichotomy. So why the gut gets the brunt force of the stress, it's only one layer thick. And so when we've shifted in this protective mode, like who's ever done a marathon? Nobody. Good. So like, I'm like a semi-competitive worker. Like I CrossFit. Like, so I put my body through a lot, but as I've aged, I've realized, okay, I need to have a couple more rest days than needed. Because if I just keep pushing harder, I don't recover. Like the purpose of exercise is to break down tissue, but you need that recovery. So if we're always in this standpoint, an easy target's going to be the gut because it's only one layer thick. So we're going to start breaking that down to free up resources, proteins, fats, to feed all these interactions. What that will then do is create this whole immune system shift, but also away from digestion. So a lot of people with autoimmune disease, a lot of them have digestive issues. Is it a random chance or is it another condition? And I would say no, it's just compilations of everything just building and kind of creating more and more. So kind of what ends up happening is now you have like these leakiness between, and it creates more immune response. But if the body's trying to fight what's in the bloodstream, now in the tube, in the gut tube, we have the chance for these non-beneficial bacteria to come in. And think of this. We said we have a decrease of oxygen. Most of those bacteria coming in are going to be anaerobic organisms. They like little oxygen. So in the East Coast, there's a ton of Lyme. Why would that surprise anybody? Like anyone that has bacterial overgrowth, those types of things, this is going to be a component. And think the things you guys are up against at 85 feet of altitude, you already have less oxygen to begin with. So you add this on top of life, and there's going to be more of that potential building, where you're just creating a great environment for these microbes and these non-bacteria and take shape. So what ends up happening is we have these environmental insults, changes the microbiome, so the bacteria in your gut, puts the immune system on alert, barrier function goes down, and then that's going to start messing with nutrients. And so remember, if we don't have enough nutrients, we have a deficiency, that then creates another stressor, and we start building back towards that protective mode. Now, if we have deficiency, what's the other one? Toxicity. And so a toxic is a substance that places a stress or challenge to the physiological systems of the body and whose net effect at a given time is inflammatory. So we talked about that. Poisonous, depleting. So a toxicity could then create a deficiency. And disrupting to the harmonious function of the whole person. So it could be physical or energetic. What does energetic mean?
Toxic person.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be attitudes. It could be that type of thing. It could be, think of all the celebration of we're going to put 5G stuff in. So you're going to have faster cell phones and faster Wi-Fi and all that. Like, we're an onslaught on that and we can't see it. Like, there's a bunch of those. So we got ones with the gut and the mouth. And something to consider with the mouth is something I saw more and more in intake paperwork is people were saying they had root canals, fillings, caps, those types of things. So we just quick did a survey of our past 30 new patients, and 28 of the 30 had some sort of invasive dental work like that. And so that can create a kind of a realm of infection and kind of silent inflammation that can keep triggering and keep the body on that protective mode. 70 to 80,000 industrial chemicals. On Netflix right now, there's a great documentary called The Devil We Know. It's all about DuPont. And in Southern Colorado, we're part of it's hit our backyard too with fountain and the water supply and all that fun stuff. But watch that before they remove it, because now they're starting to remove everything that's going against big agriculture and big medicine and all those types of things. So make sure to watch that quick. A toxin, sitting can be a toxin. Unfortunately, you guys are sitting here, but our posture. So we have, I call it the Tyrannosaurus text. So all the kids are like this today. And when you look, just the Google endocrine effects of poor posture, and you're going to see increase in cortisol, decrease in testosterone. You're going to see decrease in serotonin. So there's a whole lot of endocrine aspect with posture, because what that does, in order for the brain to get its communication, you need ample movement from all the body below. So as we start altering that motion, that's another stressor on the brain. And then number 4 is through mind, so worry, fear, and anger. But I would say one thing that I see a lot is glyphosate. And what do you guys know that as?
It's chemical, it's Roundup.
Roundup, yes, the weed killer. So it's the world's most widely produced herbicide, 700 products from agricultural to forestry. It's going to be pretty hard to escape, even if they ever ban it someday. But do you know how it works? This is what kind of got my wheels spinning when I saw this a while ago.
Is it the Roundup Ready seed, like when an insect eats part of the plant, its gut explodes?
That'd be more of a pesticide. This is killing the weeds. Yeah. So how this works is it targets the enzyme that produces tyrosine, phenylalanine, and tryptophan. Does anyone know importance of tyrosine, an amino acid? It's the building block of your thyroid. It's a building block of melanin. It makes dopamine, which is your pleasure and motivation molecule, and it makes, so basically these guys as well. So if we're destroying the building block for thyroid hormone, the body's like, you know what, I don't want to create faulty thyroid hormone, so what am I going to go do? I'm going to go overprotect it. We're going to start producing antibodies against that process. So melanin for your skin in response to sunlight. What's going to be happening to skin cancer rates as we start and putting more Roundup on things? There you go. How about our pleasure and motivation molecules in our brain? Dopamine. You can look at extreme cases, Parkinson's. That's messing with dopamine receptors. So these herbicides are going to be some nasty stuff, purposely destroying your body, and your body's like, you know what, I don't want to see these, I don't want to create these, let me go overprotect and create a stopgap for it. Chronic infections. Now, think of the bacteria in your gut. What do we have in common with those? Or what did I say was like, what kind of environment do they love?
The bad bacteria?
Yeah.
Oh, anaerobic or...
Yeah. Low oxygen, right? So when they start looking at a lot of rheumatoid stuff, you can see these opportunistic bacteria. So you're going to have some of these bacteria like as a natural flora, but opportunistic means like, hey, your defenses are down. I'm going to go party. So mom and dad left for the weekend and left the teenagers, and we're going to throw this rager. That's essentially what's going to be happening. Disrupting digestion, increasing immune expression. And so when we start looking at stool testing and things like these, it's not uncommon to see. So there's where your Epstein-Barr and your cytomegalovirus in Klebsiella, we just saw that one. And especially down in the Springs, we have a ton of military, so a lot of international travel, a lot of missionaries, a lot of international travel. So there's potential as we go into these other countries and cultures, that flora is like, hey, that's like the Vegas lights to them. Like, let's go play some roulette. And then finally, the U.S. healthcare system. If I can keep you out of the U.S. healthcare system, regardless if you see me at all, that's a win. Why? Because it's the third leading cause of death in our country. Forget creating autoimmunity. After heart disease, after cancer, your normal diagnosis and treatment is the third leading cause of our nation. But they're never going to put that on your death certificate, are they? No. Now, what's the golden child in the sacred cow of the medical system? What treatment or what intervention should I say? Drugs. Anyone more specific? Not yet. Let me add some context to it. There's been no safety test for it. And if you get injured, they've protected this injury from all liability. So imagine the government says you have to get a car. We don't require seatbelts in the car. You get into an accident. She said it, vaccines. So a colleague of mine put this chart together. This is a list of 25 autoimmune disorders. So if you take this intervention, open up the sheet that's within it, and look at adverse effects, these are listed there. They're not hiding it. This isn't conspiracy theory. And so when you look at what it is, it's our vaccines. And I only bring this up because right now, especially in our state, well, nationwide, but our state, a bill just got dropped to take away all vaccine exemptions. And regardless if you like them or not, it's still going to affect you because that means it's taking away freedom of choice. So I have 3 boys. That means they would force me to get the HPV vaccine for my boys. They don't have uteruses. You as an adult, that would force you to get every shingle shot, every flu shot every week. And they're taking away the medical exemptions except for what the CDC allows deemable, which is you had an immediate reaction on the table when you got the shot, you've had an organ transplant, or you're in the middle of cancer, basically. So they're taking away all, or trying to anyway. I think our state is smart enough that they won't do this. But that's what we're up against right now. So regardless of your stance on vaccines, pro or not, this isn't a medical issue. This is more of a freedom of choice issue type of thing. Now, with measles specifically, this is what, if we look back, most times they'll show charts from 1950 on, and like, look, here's when we introduced the vaccine, here's how it's wiped out. But if we look at the turn from the early 1900s, 90% wiped out before the vaccine was even introduced. So you got to look at a little bit of revisionist history. So when we look from, this is usually what they show you. Hey, look, 1950 this is when vaccines started. We're going to start doing this. But also antibiotics were introduced, and all those types of things. But if we look at the other side from the autoimmune, kind of about that same time is when these chronic illnesses and autoimmune started rising. And then we're like, why? They want to blame it on genetics or environmental. We're like, so we're going to spend, whatever, there's 36 shots by 18 months now. We're going to spend time overstimulating your immune system. And now we're going to question, why do we have an overactive immune system? And there's no way they can't see that. Like, there's no way that doesn't make sense to them. And then in the 1986, they're like, hey, vaccine industry, you're exempt from any injury. If there is an injury, we're going to take it out of the tax dollars and pay him that way instead. So, what really got us infectious disease out? Again, revisionist history, Journal of Pediatrics. The largest historical decrease in morbidity and mortality caused by infectious disease was experienced not in the modern antibiotic and vaccine area, but after the introduction of clean water and effective sewer systems. And I would say our clean water system is being not clean anymore. So that's why things like natural grocers use a reverse osmosis machine and get rid of all that junk that we're going to see. Other rheumatic disease induced by drugs, like that's a diagnosis. So lupus induced medical treatment. So there are more than 90 drugs that can cause lupus that have been described. And so here's the thing. So here's our definite list, here's our probable list, our possible list, and recent case reports. One of the most widely prescribed medications we have. Anamide, that's a blood pressure med. So blood pressure and cholesterol meds, those are some of the probable that can do that. Antibiotics, NSAIDs, so your ibuprofen. Hey, this is like, look at me, I was trashing my body, taking ibuprofen before going for a run or playing basketball, and I was surprised, like, I was part of the unlucky club that got eczema. Like,
How do you feel about the steroid and prednisone? Like long-term steroid use, is bad on gut or just health in general?
so she asked about long-term steroid use. That's what this is right here.
Right.
They're actually inducing you into this protective mode. Because remember, if you're running from a bear, twist your ankle, it's not going to swell up until you get to safety. So yeah, I feel great. I can keep running. But at some point, that's actually going to be a more contributor to a harder autoimmune expression long term. And at one point, I don't know if they've changed it, but you shouldn't have had more than 3 cortisone shots in a lifetime. Now I see people on it for years. And so how do we disrupt this? Instead of naming something and being the profession of what and switching to the profession of why, this is where we have to look at variables. So remember this at the top, that's you. You're this cell in this petri dish. And we have to look at your deficiencies and toxicities. And that's what's going to be this bottom rung here: nutritional, chemical, physical, mental, and medical. And there's a clear difference in people getting better the more medicine they're on versus someone that's not. I have two, cousins. They just started. One lady was already on 8 medications, one on 1. Guess who's getting a lot better quicker? Yeah, and the one cousin, I have to remind him, like, look, you had a lot more going on than this person, even though you guys have kind of grown up in the same area, like lifestyle very similar, there's more to the story. Now, when someone shifts this way, there's a kind of sequence disruption that happens. So shift here, and we have neuroendocrine. So brains talk to our hormones, adrenals, thyroid, insulin, mitochondria, those types of things. Then the gut GI system gets taken over, and then the liver detox. And so when we're looking at testing, we're trying to quantify within those 3 system sequence. Where I see people get hung up is like, I'm going to do a detox, and I think it's good intention, and they do it, and they're like, well, it doesn't go so well. Or they're like, heal the gut, heal the gut, heal the gut. But if you don't have a strong barrier, you're only going to get so far before you get frustrated and those types of things. So as much as those are great and good intention, when we get to those, starting with catabolic activity like tissue breakdown, we got to start shifting that way first. And those are kind of the 4 things we're testing for. So oxidation, inflammation, catabolic activity, and then insulin resistance. And then we address these 5. So it's basically 14 variables I'm looking at when you give me your intake paperwork, give me your labs, and like, okay, how do we quantify this? How do we put it in perspective? So one of my favorite tests is organic acids. This is a urine test, and it's basically testing you in this petri dish. So it's like an emissions test for all your functions. How you use carbs, how you use fats, your mitochondria. That's where you produce all your energy. And don't think energy just like, hey, I'm hyper, but energy to sleep, energy to digest, energy for your immune system, all those fun things. Are you utilizing nutrients? So B vitamins, amino acids, minerals. Looks at your neurotransmitters, so dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, but then there's also a few brain inflammatory markers on there. Looks at oxidative markers. Remember one we said tyrosine is what builds up thyroid hormone. There's one marker that shows the destruction of tyrosine. So it's like, even if you don't have a diagnosed thyroid disorder, I can be like, well, it's probably going to be struggling. Methylation, bacterial overgrowth in the gut. A ton of stuff on this. So that's one aspect we look at. The other is your poo. So if a lot of this is going to be gut related, we got to know what it's going to be starting with. Do we have parasites? Do we have imbalance of bacteria? Do we have digestive disorders? Am I going through puberty? Like my voice is cracking. Like yesterday I looked through one of these. Pathogens were awesome, but then we got to the gut markers, like gut super inflamed, zonulin, which is what makes you have a leaky gut, anti-gliadin, which is basically glute wheat components to it, like off the chart super high. So we didn't have the bacteria and the microbes, but we had these other things, so just different stories. Now, say with this one, people always ask me, like, why doesn't my doctor test this? What's that? Not that they don't want to know, is they don't know. Because name a medication that will fix any of these things that we... No, there's not. There's no medication for it. Where they look at blood tests, here's a cholesterol high, I have this chemical to lower the cholesterol. Or you have blood sugar high, great, here's this to do this. This is all going to be based on your nutrition and your lifestyle. So there's no incentive for them to test for this because there's no treatment within their wheelhouse to overcome this. And so this is more of a dysfunction test opposed to a diagnostic test. Again, it's the why, not the what. And same thing with this. Like you could throw truckloads of antibiotics against some of these things, but what ends up happening to that gut ecosystem? Right, it just keeps it spinning. And so I take those and we put them in this sequence. So this is where I would say, if you're trying to detox first, again, good intention, out of sequence. If you're like, I'm just going to load the gut up with probiotics, potential good intention, but you may not be getting where you need to, you have to start with this. And that's where we become the buffalo, so to speak, for you guys, where, look, this is my 15th year of practice. I've seen a ton. I've seen the hard that people go through. And I even warn people at 90 days. Like usually it's 90 days. People are making momentum, getting some good changes, and then some resistance happens. Whether something happens at work, a job change, they've got to move, relationships, they get the flu, like whatever it is. And so it's, do we keep pushing, knowing we're on the right track, take a step back and then go that way, or you're like, nope, that's it, I quit. Like, there's where we come in as your bison, whatever you call. And so we do this through a program called University. And think of this more as tuition than treatment. Because my ultimate goal is I don't want to see you guys. Like, I want to give you guys enough tools to then say, see you later. I'm going to go lead my group of friends and family into a healthier lifestyle. I'll be here for a resource. I'll be here when you have questions, but I don't want you in my office forever. Like, well, we can be friends and all that, but my goal is to be able to give you the boot and be like, great, you got this, go for it. So there's me, but we also have Jamie. She's kind of our field guide. She doesn't work in office ever. She goes to you, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's your kitchen, whether it's meal planning, whatever it is. She goes to you and does that. And Dave, he's our professor of potential, because one of the big things is, again, probably because of who I see most are professionals, they're doing things that causing them more stress. Like, so he helps them hone in their strengths so they can either build a team around that to support that and they're way more effective, or we got to hire people out that are missing that gap. And so one thing I always hear is like, hey, antibodies can't change. Like all people are like, I went to my doctor, I had these antibodies in my paper, and they're like, they said they'll never change. I'm like, well, they probably never retested them. And what they've done is just giving you stuff that's trying to suppress things opposed to actually heal them. And so one kid, 17-year-old male, came to me about a year ago. He had dropped out of school because of fatigue and brain fog. Couldn't even make it through the day. Top-level athlete, had siblings that were Division I athletes, and so they dropped him out. They went to the top pediatric endocrinologist in the state, who he had antibodies of 211 for his thyroid antibody, but guess what his TSH was? Perfect. He still had a perfect TSH, perfect T4. So guess what they told him? We can't do anything until that goes out of range. So essentially, translation, go get sicker, and then once that happens, we can give you medication for it. And so mom came to me and she's like, does that make sense to you? I'm like, no, like that's the most ridiculous thing. So we started working with them, and about 6 months later, retested the antibodies, and they're almost dropped in half. But this is going to take months and years sometimes. It's not a quick fix, especially with antibody type stuff. But guess what? He also, at 90 days, had one of those resistance things. Knocked him back. We had to push him through it, and now he's getting interviews for colleges. Like he's about to head to college in the fall, so back to school. So it can happen. So 17-year-old boy, 48-year-old female, ANA, so that's the lupus. She thought she had Hashimoto's. When we tested that, things were great. She actually had lupus instead. And again, like professional, now starting to interfere with work. Her kids are going out of house, so they're going to be empty nesters, and her husband wanted to travel. They wanted to go on vacations, but they couldn't do any of that. So got her on the program, and she was kind of losing weight. Like that's something I'll see when people are on this side long term, like the body's just breaking down. Now she's like a monster in the gym. Like her arms are like probably bigger than mine. Like she's doing dips with like 45-pound plates. Like, and her husband's a bodybuilder. So he came to me, he's like, thanks for what you did with my wife. And I'm working with him now because he's like, well, I want to age better. And like she's beating me at the gym. So yeah, but that took 16 months. Like that's the reality of the situation. They're not quick and easy. It doesn't mean they were under my care this whole time. We got them going, gave them the tools, they had the confidence, and now they can continue the path. And same thing with Sarah. She was a mom, three young kids. Had a mom that was severely disabled because of rheumatoid. Like you've seen like the hands and the joints and all that. And she had this big fear that she was heading down that same way because she tested positive for the rheumatoid. And CRP, which is a big inflammatory marker, was just creeping up and up and up and up. But she made a decision, this is not, like, I don't want this. And I think that's the hard part with autoimmune. People say, like, all these people in my family had it, that means I have to have it. Not the case. So again, hers was a 3-year battle. Like, and they had to move in there. They moved out to Northern California from here. Stayed in touch, but then she found providers out there. But she was equipped. She was motivated. She didn't give up. And then she messaged me. She's like, look, rheumatoid factor is gone. CRP is, what was it, 0.4. So essentially like perfect. Able to play with kids, homeschooler, like all this fun stuff. But just like, I think when people hear stories, they're like, hey, this happens really quick. But no, this was a 3-year battle for her. And guess what happens at the end of 3 years? Does she just stop and go back to what she's doing? No. So especially with autoimmune, it's a continual, you're going to have to work harder than other people. So just know that going into it. And so how most of these people got started, they had gifts. So some of you have books. The other gift I have for you is 30 Ways for 30 Days. So it's a month-long program. Goes to your email. Get your top tip, recommendations, things we do as a family for the next 30 days. So you're like, I have no idea where to start. Great. Here's a good place to start. 75% of it, you're like, oh, I know that, or I do that. But there may be like 3 days, you're like, oh, like that totally clicks something. So sign up. Shelly in the back's got a little tablet. You can put your name and email in there. You can get that started. Or, because I don't even know what time it is. Yeah, we're over time already. If you want to shoot me questions, because I gotta run pretty quick, set up a 15-minute phone consult, discovery call, be like, okay, like I've got XYZ going on. How would you handle this? How would you approach this? What would next steps be? And so that's totally free to you. Now, for those of you like, I already know what I need to do, I just need more guidance. Here's where you can go to the website on the home page, so morehealthlesshealthcare.com, and there's going to be an appointments tab. Just click that. Get you to the list of appointments, and there's one called the First Timers Health Audit. Nobody wants to go through an audit, but I will guarantee this is a much better approach. Like, I don't report you to anybody afterwards. I don't talk to your insurance company. I don't talk to your, like, anyone you don't want us to talk to. It's just between you and me of what have been all those life circumstances, what have been the choices, the experiences, the exposures that have probably potentially shifted you into this protective mode. What are your past lab results? That's another big thing I'm looking through. So I have a lot of homework before you and I meet. So then when we do meet, here's your chance to tell the story between all those data points. And that's where a lot of the story comes in. So even though there's a lot of intake paperwork, sitting down with you face-to-face conversation, telling your story is what's invaluable. Like, I don't know how else to say it there. And so normally that's going to be $249, that initial appointment. But another gift for you, if you book by Wednesday, we'll give that to you for half off. So whatever it is, 124, whatever 249 is divided by 2. And so you can do that. So go back to the website, hit the first timers, and there's going to be like a little thing, add a note. Just say, hey, I was at the Woodland Park talk. And that'll cue us to make sure you get that discount. And so time's almost out, so I'm going to leave you with this. You never change things by fighting against the existing reality. So the existing reality is what? You have this condition. We're going to give you antibiotics, steroids, or immune suppressors. Has that cured anyone of autoimmune disease? No. So instead, to change something, you have to build a new model that makes the old one obsolete. And so that's what functional medicine is that it's intention of making this old one obsolete. If you need emergencies, great. If you're dealing with chronic illness, this is the place for you. So thanks for your time. If you have questions, I'll hang around as I'm unpacking and all that fun stuff. Shelly can answer questions as well. But yeah, you've been awesome.